This is a Factorio rail tutorial. If you want well-organized rail in Factorio, you can arrange or download some nice tiling blueprints with well-signaled intersections, and everything will work out fine. But what if you don't want that? What if you don't have cliff explosives? Or what if you're somewhere where your tiling blueprint just doesn't tile? What if instead you wanted to organically extend your very first routes into a relaxed scenic mess of any train using any track in any direction that it wanted? What if you looked into the abyss and the abyss made you lemonade? As a method, it's going to be pretty messy. It's not going to be super great. I don't think it's ever recommended. But we're going to talk about ways today to make this not good, but maybe not bad, and perhaps that's good enough. Advantages include putting rail basically wherever you want, easily avoiding ore patches, and only bothering with signals in stations and intersections. Disadvantages include basically everything else. Why not try some of these tips in multiplayer? We're going to want a bunch of chain signals in and out of our intersections, because if we use regular signals, we'll end up with this nasty face-to-face behavior. So chain signals everywhere. And I do like a three-way intersection because then we don't have to worry about crossings, but we don't need an intersection segment as such. We can just run all of these segments one into each other, and in a lot of cases it's not any worse and is occasionally slightly better. So yeah, also be careful about maintaining live tracks. Those are also going to be two of today's themes. And all these chain signals prevent trains from getting into altercations, but also mean that one moving train might block some other moving train from going anywhere until it's got exclusive rights on its entire path to its destination. So lots of intersections, giving lots of trains pathing options will be something they'll enjoy. We'll also want rail signals into stations so they've got somewhere they can go and chill, and then chain signals back out into what we'll call the contested network. And for busy high-volume one-way train stations, consider having another segment where a train can just kind of chill before figuring out where it's going. And also, your intersection design can be as arbitrary as your route design. It's fine. And also, if you have big processing nodes with lots of trains going through quite often, if you can put the entries to these stations in a different place on your main network to the exits, that's fewer intersections that all the trains are trying to get through all the time. So that'll make them happier. Next up, a pretty general piece of Factorio train advice that's even more important when your rail network is bad, and that is to try and have as high a value cargo as possible on your trains. Like, sometimes you just need iron ore, but if you can smelt that into plates first, you can fit more on a train, and if you can process that into chips first, you can get even more on a train, which is kind of a big deal when any pair of trains on your bad network might block each other's paths. This one is a nice trick to throw in on the way to a busy mining outpost. I'm going to call it a zone stacker, reminiscent of American sports or other sources of brain trauma. It's kind of like a passing lane and a waiting room. Trains can get into this thing from either direction, and then will hang around here behind the chain signal until they get a path through the rest of, let's call it, the other zone. You can do these however you like. I like this diagonal version, and 2.0 rails are good for this because it's kind of nice and compact. You can have a lot of them, and also it's just completely symmetric around the rail signals. Is this as good as a city block? No, but you can just slap these in wherever you realize you need them. Another cute trick I like is a little one-way bypass in the middle of the base. This one's a little more situational. Elevated rails might make this easier, but we don't need them here. You kind of got to figure out how your base is expanding and what it needs. Like here we've got a bunch of useful intermediates and plates going on trains, and most of those end up all the way around the sort of the shared loop into these stations and the larger part of the base. But there's also a couple of little stations over here that basically replace expended starter patches that are still doing a bit of mall and some red and green science, and we can make those journeys easier, and therefore the lives of all the trains easier because they're sharing all the track in two ways, with another little line in here that will give them a more direct route. And then also this leads to the top half of the loop, and if we were to say tack in a little station bypass, where can we make this work? Yes. Then this will also, if we signal it, give these copper trains a way to go all the way around this section of the loop and then cut in as a shortcut to back to these other stackers and get back up to, yeah, the area where their mining is. A lot of this is just making up for earlier bad decisions. We can make bad station design decisions as well. Like, the usual advice is to balance off all the wagons of your train station, but this is not actually the fundamental concern. The underlying reason is we don't want to accidentally throttle a build when the train starts to run low on material. So for example, we're not fully mixed, we have uneven draw, this wagon runs out first, we're no longer fully saturated, whatever we were building here is now unhappy. And this won't fix itself until the rest of these wagons run out of material and we get a new train. This is the situation we want to avoid. So for example, these train stations that are replacing the starter mining, maybe we could have station chests here, maybe we could do a clever mixer, whatever. The only thing we really care about from this location is that the red and green science, and maybe the military, that they keep running. And so we've got a box of copper plate, we've got a box of gears, we've got non-logistic boxes of the ingredients this build needs to continue. And so as long as there's still some stuff in this box and this build is running, we don't really care whether or not there's a train here, or even if it unloads evenly when there is. Other methods of ensuring reliable supply include having more trains in parallel and just taking less off each train, and then also just having another train ready to get in as soon as the first one is gone. And we can even throw signals in the middle of the train station so that this next train can start to get in even before the first train is left. Here's an example of a pretty standard early train station. We've got a lot of splitters separating the wall between different wagons and different boxes so that all the input inserters can be working as fast as they can to load the train. We could do this on both sides if we wanted to, with even more splitters and inserters, or perhaps alternatively, here's an easier to build loading station that your friends might hate. We have inserters from the boxes but also directly from the belt. The only real subtlety is we have limited these boxes to spread out the ore. But before we talk about why this is better, let's look at a version that's much worse. This station doesn't even respect wagon balance, but in a way that works out just fine, because if there's enough stuff in the boxes to fill a train, then it all just gets in the wagons. If there's no stuff in the boxes, then you're limited by the mine, and so both wagons will get filled before anything goes in a box. And if you're in kind of an intermediate state where the outside boxes have material and the inner boxes don't, these inner wagons are the ones that are prioritized by the belt. So yeah, this is a pattern that is not really any worse, sometimes better, looks terrible, you're welcome. Fewer splitters can also make it easier to jam something like this into a place where a normal station just might not fit. And we could scale this up to 8 wagons and 4 belts of any color as well, which is a decently sized station. We do want to balance between all these belts properly, but we got a trick for that as well, especially in cases where the mining patch is wider and you get more belts on it than the number you want to feed into the train. You can run some of the central ones backwards, and a splitter here will ensure that the other mining drills can find space on the belts, but we're also prioritizing the miners in the middle of the patch with the most ore, and then when we get down to the front near the station, we got fewer belts, which means we can use a simpler splitter, so that's an improvement that looks worse. Returning to rail and track related misplays, this kind of central section of this base seems to be having some issues, even if it's not busy right now. Maybe that's because I'm in it, but it's got, yeah, important train stations on each side, kind of short connection distances, a lot of trains trying to go in a lot of different directions, not really room for a stacker, but also it's kind of in the middle of a large messy base with quite a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of trains trying to just generally path through it and around it. So I think we're going to give it a roundabout. And I have in mind a kind of one-way roundabout, so it's going to be kind of like a stacker and an intersection at the same time. And because it's one way, when we know we have a feed into the roundabout that's one way, we can just connect that with a little more control. With space inside the roundabout for trains to park. And And now we have made everything better by making it worse. Instead of having a single spine through the middle where all the trains were trying to pass and get in each other's way, we now have a loop of rail where trains can just get on and go around until they find their exit and sort of hang out with other trains and be generally happy. Congratulations on completing this training course. You can find on my channel additional examples of Factorio gameplay that's technically functional but gets more disastrous as you look at it. Why not try the lemonade? Please make things worse responsibly.